Shut up and sit down.
Hello everyone, today it's Andy from Big Mac's Painting Workshop and Painting Studio, and today I'm painting another Fyreslayer from AOS. It's been a while since we've done any AOS stuff, so I thought I'd give it a bit of a change, and I'd like to apologise about the lack of videos recently. We have been very busy with other projects. So getting right into it, I'm doing a base coat of tusk of fur onto the flesh regions, which there is quite a lot of, so it's going to be quite a heavy flesh tutorial. And obviously, as always, a couple of good coats of it, and making sure that we're getting a nice smooth finish across the entire region what we're working with. So as you can see, I'm using a fairly big brush there because I'm not trying to do anything fancy, I'm just trying to get the paint down. And I'm going to start highlighting with a mix of Bugman's Glow into the model, obviously on the raised areas. And what we're doing, I'm just keeping the paint really thin like I normally would do. I'm going to sort of add these highlights really gently. It just makes the model look better if you keep on using the thin down paint, and it really helps in the long run. Improves your technique. Since I've really started to thin my paints down, even my technique's improved a hell of a lot just recently, just by trying to avoid using washes where I possibly can, and just try and allow the details to pop through the highlights rather than shading. Once again, I'm adding a touch more Bugman's Glow into the mix, so it's much more of it's about a pure Bugman's Glow, maybe 70-30 Bugman's Tuskor. And I'm starting to accentuate the muscle texture on the fig. Now, I'm doing a lot of work on his back, which you can't actually see once the model's done. But it's a really nice big plain area, so it focuses well on the camera. So now I've added a touch of Cadian Flesh into the Bugman's Glow. I'm just throwing some more accentuating highlights onto the muscle tone, and really starting to bring them raised muscles out. Because this guy's obviously he's a dwarf, he's an angry naked dwarf at that, so his muscles are a really prominent feature of the figure. And once again, I'm doing a bit more of the same. These areas are predominantly Cadian Flesh tone. Still a touch of the Bugman's in there, just to add a little bit of red into the areas. And now I'm working just on the extreme highlights with pure Cadian Flesh tone. I wanted to keep the skin fairly dark because it's a fire dwarf of some kind. I couldn't really say much about Age of Sigmar. That's why we're doing a Fyreslayer, because we don't have much of Age of Sigmar, to be honest. Myself and Dodge don't actually play it, although it's something I definitely want to try and get involved in. It seems to be quite active these days, so hopefully I might be able to get a game in it at some point. The Cadian Flesh tone now is being highlighted with Kislev Flesh. Again, just on the upper reaches. Now I've gone for quite exaggerated highlights here. I'm going to put a wash over the fig, in any case, even though I was saying I'm trying to avoid using washes on flesh. I did it on this because of the real deep muscle texture. So I'm adding a Reekland flesh shade, which is quite heavily mixed down with a thinning medium. And I've added I had a couple of coats of this Reekland into the model. Now obviously as I've added the thinner into it, I can just slap it on there and it'll the thinner will evaporate away and just leave the paint pigment very thin into the recesses. But once that's dried, back over again. Again, a generous coating, even though it is thinned, just to get the pigment exactly where it needs to be. I'm just letting the pigment itself do the work. I'm not directly putting it into recesses. Once it's dried, I go back onto the extreme highlights with the same colours before, which I believe was Kislev, and I'm just picking out the highlights where they were over faded by the wash. Just the areas what were raised initially, and I've got wash sort of faded areas from the wash on there. So once I was happy with the flesh work, I started moving on to the armour. I wanted the armour to look like a brass or a coppery colour, so really sort of rich, almost of the same sort of colour pattern as the flesh, but doing metallics. So I start off with hammered copper by Vallejo. As you're aware, you could probably use hashed copper, etc. from the GW ranges if that's your thing. And I wanted to make his armoured beard stand out a little bit, so I did a two-tone scheme on that using Dark Reaper and Gory Red. And I've continued the alternate pattern onto the lower regions of his sort of tabard loincloth thing, and then also onto his back, which has got the same pattern. Once I'd got a decent coating of that, I did a few very thin layers of Bloody Red, which is again a Vallejo game colour paint. This often comes out quite glossy, so make sure that you put a matte varnish over the top of it once you finish doing what you want to do. Same with the Gory Red, can be quite a glossy finish. The horns were done in Ubshabti bone. As a base anyway. And the cloak itself was painted in Vallejo's extra opaque black green, which I've said before is basically Dark Angel's green. It's just what I happen to have available to me. My Dark Angel's greens died a long time ago, so I just happened to use this one instead. They're completely interchangeable, they're basically the same colour. The loincloth and his belts was a base of Rhinox hide. I wanted a nice rich red to complement all the other sort of very reddish colours across the figure. I wanted him to look quite vibrant. Whilst I was waiting for other stuff to dry, I started on the runes on the back of his cloak, and they were obviously done in the hashed copper, just the same as all the other runes across his armour and his skin. And I then start to highlight with bright brass. Now, the bright brass I kept thin so I could paint across the entirety of the runes, then allowing me to mix some of the Vallejo's gold, liquid air metal gold, and that is a very much more pointed sort of highlight keeping it towards the regions where the light would reflect off it better. Now when you're looking for things like that on cloaks, obviously you've got to make, you want to look at the raised regions, but also imagine where how the cloak's flowing, so just be aware that sometimes the highlights won't go exactly where you would imagine. So I'm throwing a little bit of, it's a combination of Vallejo's gold and a touch of chrome silver, just to bring them highlights up. It really works well together with the chrome silver. It's the silver's a very, very bright colour. And I'm just throwing just some touches of Vallejo's Chrome. I tend to use this instead of the lead belcher, etc., because I only use it as a top highlight colour. The lead belcher is very, very muted, a very dull colour. I tend to use it more on the gold than I do on silvers, as it just sort of adds that little shine effect to it. And back to the reds again. Once the highlights are starting to go in, I'm using again bloody red. I'm just bringing up that centre point where the highlights would be, also on the edges, just to really make that vibrant red stand out. I'm mixing a touch of yellow in as well, just to round up those highlights, just to really make them pop out. And on the dark Reaper, that is mixed with off-white. A white will do. I tend to use off-white myself. It's just a little less chalky. And I'm adding the highlights very gently. Really, really thin paint here towards the towards the lower regions on a single edge, just to really make them stand out a bit. The beard I painted grey rather than the standard Fyreslayers orange. I felt that there was a lot of red and orange on there, so I stayed away from orange beard. Also, we don't actually have that particular colour, which I believe is Troll Slayer orange or something like that. It's not something we actually own, so it's not an option at the minute. It's not something we've ever really used either. But I'm just throwing some lighter grey highlights over the German grey, using Mechanicus Battle Grey, and then, Mechanicus Battle Grey was the top. The white sections on his crest, because obviously our dwarves are blue and white crests. The white sections were pale blue-grey, which works really well in replacement for Celestria grey. It's a nice bright grey, but really works well working to the white. And the blue sections of the crest were painted, start off with a deep Prussian blue, which is also what I use on my Night Lords, as it's a much richer, much more lively colour than Cantor blue, which is the GW equivalent. I tend to find Cantor blues a little bit flat. There's not much going about it, so I don't like to use it. It just doesn't look right for me. The highlights on the crest will start off with off-white. Of course, you can go straight from pale grey blue to off-white, as pale grey blue is such a light colour. You can also do this on the Calistria as well. It just adds an extra layer to the highlights, so they don't jump from a light grey to a white. You've got an extra stepping stone in between. And once you got a decent coverage with the white, obviously using the side of a brush, I'm just flicking over the crest with pure white, just adding to the extra raised areas. But I'm not going all the way up. I'm actually deliberately making sure that these are really gentle. Just making sure that I've got the highlights exactly where I want them to be. Don't worry if you have to take it down a little bit. You're not taking huge steps back and up and down. to get the colour you want. The dark blue was then mixed with a touch of magic blue, which is Vallejo colour. I tend to use that as a highlight, one of my highlights for the dark Prussian blue. Again, it's another lively colour, so it really works well with it. And it just adds a little bit of exaggerated highlights to the blue. I then did a few extra highlights, mixing in a little bit of white across the crest as well. The flame, dead easy to do with flame this way. A couple of really thin layers of burnt red. This could be replaced with corn red, much the same tone, but it's deliberately kept the paint translucent. I then threw some Vallejo grey black, again incredibly thin, so I could put a few layers to get the misty colour across the tops of the fire, so it looks like it's turning to smoke there. Whilst we're waiting for those to dry properly, I then added some stick green into my Caliban green, just throwing some highlights across the dragon scale along the back. Once I've done that, I started adding some moot green into it as well, to add some real vibrant highlights, very sort of yellowy colour. As always, keeping these paints thin, it's pretty essential to get a nice coverage. It's not a drama adding extra layers. Taking layers away is a pain, because obviously you need to be going back to the beginning. And I'm just picking out the edges of the scales and the edges of the cloak itself, just with a final highlight of a bit of sick green, just to really make it stand out. Now I had to go back over with the Caliban green again, just to tidy things up, but that wasn't a problem. So back onto the flame. Again, incredibly thin layers. I'm using a mix of red and a touch of yellow in there as a next brighter colour for the flame, and I'm just dotting it about. The flame on this particular fig is quite lumpy, which makes it really interesting to highlight. We can really work those recesses and raised areas to make them look really colourful flame. And I'm adding fiery orange into the mix as well now, which, although is a very, very translucent colour, I still thin down just to make sure that I don't get any thickness on the paint. That's the last thing you want on something like this. I'm mixing a touch of yellow into the fiery orange to bring it out to a more yellowy colour. And there you got something that looks a little bit like a bit of flame. So it's got that heat sort of thing going on. So I'm starting to highlight the brown sections, which I use with a little bit of Rakoff flesh mixed into the Rhinox hide, just to add the highlights into it. The horns are highlighted in the standard GW tricolour, using Carrack Stone as a second layer, and then finally going up to Screaming Skull at the top. It just adds that you can't go wrong with them, with that particular colour transition. They really do work well together. And if you throw a little bit of a wash on there, they really do add nicely. The black staff for his axe was highlighted in Skaven Black Dinge, and then Mechanicus Battle Grey. Once I'd done all this, I did actually throw a gloss varnish and an oil wash over the top, then matted him at the end, just to pick out all the details and add a little black lining in across the figure, which is how we both like to finish a figure as well. So if this is the sort of thing what you want to see any more of, hit like and subscribe. If you like what you're seeing and you like the way we do things, again, please subscribe. Every little helps. So if there's anything you want to see, if you want to see more Age of Sigmar or whatever, if there's any models you want us to have a look at, please let us know in the comments, and I'll see you in the next one. Take care, guys. Bye bye.